As the coronavirus spreads, people are in real danger of contracting the virus, spreading it, and even potentially causing death. Recently, we've seen a large amount of public gatherings being called off, and experts are predicting that there will be a large spike in critical hospitalizations. So what can be done to flatten the curve? Welcome to another week of Science Trending. I'm here with Kent Kingston and I'm Daniel Kuberek. And before we get stuck into things, it's time to get some hand sanitizer on.
That's right, hand sanitizer. My skin's going to be drying out. I think I need to alternate between sanitizer and moisturizer, or I'm going to start getting cracked.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
But it seems to be the right thing to do at the moment to be using a lot of this stuff because
Absolutely.
In the last week we've seen massive developments as far as coronavirus goes. A lot of large-scale events have been called off. I think the government is now saying that any event with 500 people or more is not allowed to go ahead.
Well, in other countries it's even smaller. I believe in Germany it's got as small as 5 people. They don't want gatherings of more than 5 people, which is just like nuts.
Yeah, crazy. And that sort of brings to question various activities. Should we all stay home? You know, is there any point to going out at all? I think another recent thing that has happened is a lot of emphasis has been put on the elderly people in society because what they're saying now is that even if you have the virus and it's got no effect on you and you're not at risk of potentially, suffering from it, you could pass it on to someone who might. Someone who might be in a critical condition or whatever.
Right. But I mean, what's pretty clear though is that it's not business as usual anymore. It just doesn't feel like that. I mean, the office building next to us is closed down. One case of someone who came back from overseas, tested positive, whole office shut down. People working from home. I'm in contact with other offices overseas. Same story there. Those offices are shut down. People saying, yeah, I'm working from home. Sorry, I don't have access to that information right now. The shops, you just don't know if the stuff you want is going to be there when you go there, and this seems to provoke the panic, which provokes the over the hoarding, the over shopping, which is just it's a bit of a death spiral in some ways.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of organizations don't know how to react to this at the moment. For example, I was following on Twitter the other day the Formula One Australian Grand Prix, which was supposed to happen in Melbourne, and it seemed like the organisers didn't know actually whether to call it off or to go ahead with it. On the Friday, I was just on Twitter looking through what the journalists were reporting, and some of them were reporting that it'd go ahead. Some of them were saying that it would go ahead without anyone in the crowd, and others were saying that it would be completely called off. And they actually did call it off after people were already lining up at the gates.
Oh, so 11th hour.
Yeah,
messy.
So it was like a little bit confusing, but you can also sort of understand that there's a lot of confusion around this in general, not a lot of people not knowing what to do.
It's interesting to, I guess, see the commentary coming out. You see some people saying, they're freaking out, and then other people are saying it's all alarmism. This is over the top. What is going on? Like, it's not even that serious a virus. We just all need to calm the farm a bit. Where do you think the balance is? Like, where's the right place to strike that balance?
Well, I actually saw something recently which was talking about the 1918 flu pandemic in the United States, which was sort of comparing two cities of St. Louis and Philadelphia and how they responded. Philadelphia actually went ahead and allowed large public events to continue.
It was a big parade, wasn't it?
That's right.
Yeah.
Whereas St. Louis started locking down schools, cinemas, sort of public gatherings. And what we found in Philadelphia was that hospitalizations just peaked off, and they couldn't sustain the amount of people that were coming in. Whereas St. Louis, the curve, or what we're now hearing as flattening the curve, was much smaller. So what they're trying to do is sort of go off of that same model of trying to get everyone to stay home and these public gatherings to be called off, because otherwise we might overload our hospital system.
So it's not necessarily that you might not end up having COVID-19. It's just the fact that the curve is not only flatter, it's a longer curve. So if we do this sort of trying to minimise the immediate impact strategy, what might happen is that for several months from now, people still could be contracting the virus, but because there are a few of us at a time getting it, therefore the health system can cope with it. That's sort of the flattening the curve argument, isn't it? Look, it makes sense to me.
So we're seeing churches also implement sanitization methods. We're seeing a lot of these bottles around at churches as well.
Yeah, also I think like vacuum sealed, communion, wine and wafer packs, individually opened. Yeah, certainly no common cups, being passed around like some denominations do. Fair enough.
Yeah, that's right. And amongst large-scale events being shut down of 500 people or more, a lot of churches are affected. Some of them are deciding to close down. In this time when there's a lot of hopelessness, a lot of anxiety, people are wondering where they should turn to. And it was actually...
And if you can't turn to the church, that is tough. But I honestly do think, though, it's not just churches that are over 500, that should be taking this seriously. Because, most churches in Australia are under 500 members, let's face it, we're not all Hillsong. So those, particularly churches with a lot of elderly members, I think in particular should be looking at this really, really carefully. You've got some really vulnerable people in your congregation. You need to think really seriously about, do we actually hold weekly services or are there other alternatives? For example, an online service, a live stream, that can be difficult when a lot of old people aren't that tech savvy. But I think it's really important to, find some alternatives that are going to work for those older congregations.
That's right. And as I was mentioning, in this time of sort of anxiety, when people are looking for hope, one of the things that they can turn to, which is in fact prayer. Now, the Urban and Housing Development Secretary in the United States, Dr. Ben Carson, actually declared on the weekend that it'd be a good idea for there to be a national day of prayer. And he said,
I've actually seen Christian groups in Australia making similar pleas, asking Scott Morrison, hey, we need to schedule a day of prayer for what we're going through here.
That's right. And he said that it would be an opportunity for people to pull together, and then he said there is nothing wrong with godly principles, no matter what your faith is, loving your neighbor, caring about the people around you. Now, what is the power of prayer? Does prayer have a positive effect in a situation like this, do you think?
Look, I think for a believer, it's an absolutely a really powerful thing. There's that sense of presence, that sense of connection with God. There's certainly a long list of people who would tell you, prayer has made a real difference in my life. I've seen real changes out of this. But even for the non-believer, even for someone who doesn't necessarily believe that prayer works or prayer is real, I think even they would have to accept that there's benefit in just stopping, reflecting, communicating what you're feeling about the situation, admitting that you're not completely in control. This is a part of what prayer is all about. And from that position, I think you're in a much better place to actually go on to make rational decisions about what comes next, what your priorities are, and where to go from there.
And that's one of the misconceptions about prayer, which is that it's like this band-aid solution to everything, which is not the case at all, because you still need to do the practical things like washing your hands, using hand sanitizer. A lot of churches actually are posting on their websites saying to do these things because you still don't want to pass on the virus to someone who is at risk, you know what I mean?
I think it's really important to think of the practicalities, not just for yourself, but also for perhaps your neighbours, perhaps your elderly relatives. It's really important to check in with them, see how they're okay. Maybe go to your neighbour's door and say, hey, are you okay? You don't have to go into the house or whatever. That unfortunately increases risk. But at least through the screen door, hey, are you okay with your medication? Are you okay with your shopping? Anything I can do, to help? I'll, come back in, tomorrow and just check to see if you're okay again. I think that's the least we can do, Make some phone calls to your grandparents or elderly parents or other relatives and just check that they're okay.
Absolutely.
Well, it's been great to have you with us for another week of Signs Trending. I'm Ken Kingston.
And I'm Daniel Kuberek.
Jump on the comment section under this video. We'd love to see what you think.